far as plants with tendrils, there are a lot of varieties of plants that produce tendrils. I'm going to focus on some that are a little more prominent and where having tendrils is more widespread in the family. So we'll cover Vitaceae, Cucurbitaceae. Here's that family Fabaceae again. If you remember, that was featured in the stem twiners. This is also a family that's capable of producing tendrils. And then again, it's not really a widespread feature in the family, but maybe you can recall some garden plants in the bean family that have these tendrils, and also some non-garden, some wild plants also have the tendrils. Then this is a monocot group, Smilax, we'll talk about. So tendrils, what are tendrils? Tendrils are modified structures. Interestingly enough, they can be modified from a variety of features that kind of contrasted with the stem twining. So they have a similar strategy to the stem winding itself around, but instead this is a modified structure. It could be part of a leaf, as illustrated here in this Fabaceae. You can see some leaflets coming out of this compound leaf, and then farther along, still on the compound leaf, are parts that have converted into being these tendrils. So this is a modified leaf. In the group Smilax, these are modified stipules. And Cucurbitaceae, not sure about that one. We have modifications, have to check on that one. And then Vitaceae, this one, interestingly enough, is kind of homologous to an inflorescence. So what otherwise produces flowers in parts of the plant that need to do this tendril growth, they produce them in the same locations where they otherwise would produce flowers. All right, so we'll start off with that one. This is Vitaceae. The genus Vitis is the genus of grapes. So grapevines, and we do have some wild grapevines quite widespread in Wisconsin. Some that are a little more edible than others, I suppose. So you can eat wild grapes if you're so inclined, but they have big seeds and bitter skins. Another one that we have that I would recommend not eating is Parthenocissus, the woodbine. And a variety of tendrils. We've got some that are a little more traditional tendrils. I really like these images that show them kind of spread out, reaching, exploring their environment, looking for a place to grab onto. And after they find a place to hold on to, then they start basically like scrunching themselves up to draw the plant closer to that support. So these would wind around whatever they locate. And then in the Parthenocissus, there's a feature where these tendrils basically have pads on the ends. So they grow into a structure. They recognize that they're in a place that's good to grow onto, and these pads will swell up and kind of tuck themselves into the texture of the thing they're growing up. So a feature I've got highlighted here is that the tendrils are opposite the leaves. So we have a leaf, and right across from it is a tendril, either this one with pads, or in this case, we've got a leaf and then one of these more twining tendrils on the other side. The leaves are pretty different between these two main groups. Main genera we have in Wisconsin, Parthenocissus has palmately compound leaves. That's certainly helpful for identifying that. We also see different amounts of compound. There are trifoliolate leaves in this family. I can show you one from the greenhouse. And then some that are just simple leaves, so not compound in the grapevine group, but sometimes deeply lobed. And then nicely showing this palmate venation. So palmate is a common feature between these. We got palmately compound, and then over here, palmately veined. So kind of a unifying feature there. Interesting flowers. They're rather small, rather inconspicuous. I'd say you're much more likely to identify this plant by the grapes that happen later. We also have plants in this group, especially the members of genus Vitis, that sometimes don't produce flowers for a long time until they found good habitat for them to grow in. But it is inflorescence, technically a little panicle, so lots of branching. You can see a main axis here, growth off to the side with some more branching and so on. So rather bunched up collection of lots and lots of flowers together. Mentioned that one already. So I mentioned that the tendrils were opposite the leaves. Here's inflorescences opposite the leaves. So parts of the plant that have committed to flowering, that's right across from a leaf, right across from a leaf, and so on. And the fruits are berries. The members of the grape genus are edible. other ones not so much. And you could probably picture a cluster of grapes. Some of the wild versions, not quite so big as your commercial grapes, but still pretty similar structure. So creeper, woodbine for the genus Parthenocissus, and vitis for grapes. Okay, so moving over to another tendril twining family. We have a family called Cucurbitaceae, and that family name comes from a genus called Cucurbita, and it starts off the same as cucumber. So you can kind of remember this as the cucumber family, and sure enough, it is. Genus Cucumis is for the cucumbers. There's sort of a variety of similar names here. Cucumis, Cucurbita, all the same family. We have this one locally. This is the spiny cucumber found locally. It's not one that you'd want to eat. It's not really all that fleshy, but has a lot of features in common, as we will see. So tendrils and herbaceous plant. Leaves kind of similar to what we talked about in the grapevine family. The grapevine family is, so Vitaceae is more woody plants. This is a family of herbaceous plants. And otherwise, palmately veined, sometimes lobed, sometimes hairy. That can be helpful for this family, distinguishing it from Vitaceae. And relatively small inflorescence, so sometimes a single flower at a time, as in a lot of our garden plants. So cucumis, this is cucumber again. So nice illustration here of an inferior ovary. It's going to develop into your cucumber. And then the perianth and other reproductive parts of the flower above that. So inferior ovary. But just this one flower at a time. Down here, one flower at a time. This melon plant. And a lot of variety in the flowers. So squash and cucumber and those kinds of flowers have rather large flowers. This spiny cucumber, Echinocystis, has rather small flowers and big clusters, develops into relatively small fruits. So individually, maybe a little hard to pin down the flowers exactly, but developing into that melon type of fruit, which is really a modified berry, is helpful for this. So berry type of fruit with a rind to varying degrees. And here's some local plants. So Echinocystis, the wild cucumber, the spiny cucumber, and then this other one called burr cucumber, genus Sicyos. And lots of economically important plants. Everything we call a melon, also including squash, cucumber, as I said, zucchini. Once you put all these in the same family, you can start seeing the repeat of similar kinds of structures. So the seeds are similar, the structure of the rind and the flesh is structured similarly. Some people prefer to call these by a specialized name, pepo. I like just calling them berries. I like simple definitions for my fruit types. But these all, you can kind of see the similarities there. So differences in shape and flavor, but otherwise pretty similar structure. So some of the economic ones, I mentioned cucumis, cucurbita, citrullus is a watermelon, pretty widespread. The melons that we eat are native to North and South America. So that's kind of a nice little local celebrity, I guess, for your fruit types. So this was a study going through the phylogeny of these edible cucumbers. There's a lot of variety. They've got some names. Some of these I wasn't familiar with before I saw this study. And this kind of tracks with the people who lived in North America. So before European settlement, this area was just full of people, big civilizations, and they had domesticated their own different versions of melons. So sweet and savory, and some for storage, all kinds of cool plants there. Another one that's kind of off the beaten path in the Cucurbitaceae is a plant called loofah. This is actually a genus name, and maybe you're familiar with a loofah sponge. So the so-called sponge of loofah, actually, if you look at it, has a lot of botanical features. So the loofah sponge is not a sponge in the sense of it being an animal, a marine animal, or anything like that. people can wash themselves with marine animal sponges, but the structure of the loofah sponge is much more regular. You've got these locules, these containers where the seeds would have been. And then in and among them is just this fiber that, as this fruit dries out, remains stiff, stiff and flexible and spongy and holds on to liquid, and it's good for abrasion. So it's kind of a luxury sponge item, the loofah sponge. So this is how you get them commercially, and this is how they grow. Maybe you can even grow loofah sponge in your garden. They basically grow like this, and then the skin dries and peels away, and you got yourself a loofah sponge with seeds inside.